I am very excited again to be here with Phil Willburn of Workday and Zoe Kibbey of Accenture. How are you two doing? Zoe, you're joining us from the UK, is that right?
I am. It's a sunny day. It's not raining. Happy to be here.
All right. Phil, how are you doing?
Great. Mostly always sunny in California, so I can't complain.
All right. Well, hey, I'm needless to say excited to see you two. I'm also excited to address this topic because obviously it's been top of mind for not only boards and executive teams, but really everybody. We had the anniversary of George Floyd yesterday, and it was the case where, there's a lot of dialogue in the public domain about what has been done, what has yet to be done. And I'm particularly curious in the role of organizations and particularly leadership to advance the cause of social justice and more inclusive environments. So how about we start with you, Zoe? Give a brief introduction of yourself and role there at Accenture, and same with you, Phil, then I'll get out of your way and let you all do your thing.
Sure. So I'm part of our global inclusion and diversity team at Accenture. So I guess in the people analytics space, I'm a consumer of people analytics. So it's going to be really interesting to talk through and share our journey that we've been on.
All right. Well, thanks. Phil?
Yeah, I lead our people analytics function here at Workday. Been at Workday for the past 4 years and have partnered with consumers, you would want to say, Zoe, like Zoe, over the last couple of years to really move forward our vibe strategy around valuing inclusion, belonging, and equity for all here at Workday.
All right. Well, again, I look forward to listening. I'm going to get out of your way now and let you do your thing, and I'll come back in about 25 minutes or so, and we'll talk about it. Sound good?
All right. Thanks, Al.
All right. Enjoy.
All right. Great. Thanks, everybody, for joining us for this really important conversation. And before we kind of start, Zoe and I just wanted to kind of recognize the importance of yesterday's anniversary of George Floyd's death. We really feel this is a defining moment in our society. And hopefully over the past year, it shows that we've made some positive progress in areas around social awareness, and we still need to make progress in recognizing and upholding these important values of diversity, equity, inclusion for all. And I think it's really a privilege sometimes in our jobs that we need to continue to push this in our own respective organizations, and we all have a responsibility to do this. And that's why I'm really excited that Zoe is here for me and her to share a little bit about our own journeys in the context of what's going on in the world today. So thanks, Zoe, for joining us, and I'm so happy and look forward to this conversation.
That's going to be good.
So great. So, we have a very fun and exciting conversation here today. We're going to be, Zoe and I are going to be talking about planning for diversity and inclusion and where our respective organizations are at right now. And it wouldn't be a Workday a presentation or information if there's not a safe harbor slide. Here's what I'm going to say about this. Zoe and I are practitioners. I don't think I'm going to make forward-looking statements on the product because I don't really know. But I still have to have this as part of the presentation here. And I know, Zoe, you briefly kind of teed up an introduction of yourself, but maybe tell us a little bit more about your role and responsibilities there at Accenture.
Sure. So I guess probably a lot of people will know Accenture as an organization, but I'm on the inside. I'm taking care of the diversity, the inclusion, the belonging of our Accenture people. So what I'm going to share today is the work that we've been doing on ourselves. I mean, for sure, we're working with clients and sharing that journey, but that's really where I'm coming from. So whilst you can probably hear that I'm from the UK, I have a global role. So I look after our I&D strategy, our segment strategy, we call it. So our work and our focus on gender, race and ethnicity, our LGBT community, disability, mental wellness, culture, kind of all of these aspects. So I have a team kind of setting the strategy, a global strategy, but also local strategies where relevant for the market as well.
Yeah, and Accenture has also been very public. I just remember 2017, the gender equality goals that were set. I think you guys have been very forward-looking. I can only imagine the pressure that puts on you, but it's also exciting that you guys are really forward-thinking in this space. So thanks for joining me here today.
Welcome.
All right. So as two practitioners, we're going to be sharing two different journeys. And as we were prepping for this conversation, Zoe and I kind of went back and forth to say, how did we make progress, and how are we aligning our organizations to really drive, or I'd say, substantial change on our diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging goals. And we kind of landed on this framework. It's funny because I was like, I think this is how we went about it. And Zoe's like, hey, that seems like the way we've kind of organized as well. And so we put these three broad areas. One is around the three main challenges around this work and really aligning an organization, which is, number one, how do you get everybody on the same page? How do you align everybody so that they know, hey, we need to focus on this, we need to make real progress, so forth. And once you align people, how do you actually decide where you're going to go? What is the plan moving forward, and so forth? And lastly, I call this holding ourselves accountable. I think it's important because I think there's been a lot of goal set. There's a lot of goal setting without a lot of goal getting, which means going after that goal every day. And from an analytics perspective, it's like, how do you infuse this kind of system of accountable analytics to ensure that you're moving forward? And so we're going to talk about how we've done that. That's also where we've making kind of substantial investments in programs and changes in that regards. So let me just tee up a little bit about what we've been doing here at Workday around getting on the same page. So we've been on a journey since I've been kind of leading the function about 2.5 years with our Chief Diversity Officer around how do we align everybody to speak the same language. And I tell you, when we started this journey, we weren't that aligned, and it had to do a lot with the myriad of data and different views and reporting that was out there. And one of the first things we had to do is say, hey, who are the personas that we're serving in our organization, and how are we teeing up this data, and are we configuring and showing the reviews that are consistent across all of our personas in order to do that? And when we first started, it was pretty simple. There was this kind of diversity dashboard, which we call Vibe Central, and it has the important key data there, but it's mostly serving the IND function or the Chief Diversity Officer function, but it wasn't really cascading integrated across the organization. So we actually had to expand our view, and you can see when we expanded our review, we realized that the importance of diversity data and insights is critical, not just for the IND function, but it's also critical for the TA function. How are they going to make progress towards the goal if they don't understand the diversity funnel they're having, or the HR partner function? How are we going to grow diverse leaders if we're having retention issues regarding that? And then executives, and I think this is really important, and Zoe, I know me and you have talked about this, but the fact that executives see and understand the diverse makeup of their workforce on a regular basis, aligned with what they're trying to drive from the goals, is really critical. And so this expansion of the personas was kind of the first spot when we were getting on the same page. And essentially what we ended up doing is providing similar views across all of those key personas so that everybody was speaking the same language and they could see the same views. Of course, and some, like with executives, it's aggregated up, but in others, we could give really clear trending data that goes across our HR partners, our TA partners, our belonging diversity partners, and then they were enabled to coordinate with each other to do that. And just to give you a kind of how important this is, and sorry Zoe, I'm in the data world, so I got to continue to show data here. How critical this is we spent time really curating the views that we thought were the most powerful, and then allowing people to see it. And this is one of the views we curated, which is around diverse hiring, and really taking a second look at the pipeline, where you can look at what I would call a parity view of the pipeline. If you have a certain percentage of people, whether it's gender or US ethnicity or other race and ethnicities coming into your organization, what do you expect would happen as they go through the talent pipeline? In some cases, one of the goals for TA is I need to source more diverse talent. I think that's great. But also there can be breakdowns in the TA funnel where it's like, hey, actually from the new stage, we're getting lots of, in this case, you see Asian talent coming in the organization, but there is a drop off between screen and interview. So there's actually an intervention that needs to happen here. And this differs by job profile, job family, supervisory organization, function, segment, country. And so it's not just important to do an analysis on this. What's important is what we end up doing is infusing this view so that every belonging diversity partner, TA partner, HR business partner, and executive knows exactly where it stands when it comes to bringing diverse talent in. And once we were able to do that, curate these views, again, for us, it's not enough to curate the data. We have to enable it. So we spent time in deep dive enablement. Here's how you understand your organization's diversity patterns. Here's what's going on in your organization. Here's how you can self-serve this up. And all of this work helped to align the organization around, what we're trying to do is get people on the same page and give them the tools to really make change. So I know that's how we did it here. Zoe, you've been on quite a bit of a longer journey, I would say, for us, but would love to hear how Accenture thought about that journey and really getting everybody on the same page from that perspective.
Sure. And I know you're going to show a picture now, but I promise I'm going to show some numbers and data too. So what's interesting about this is I actually joined Accenture in 1997, so nearly 25 years. So actually this timeline that I'm showing here kind of reflects my own personal timeline, which is kind of interesting. But I guess what I wanted to share here is where we started from, and kind of where data and analytics came in later and helped us accelerate the journey that we're on, accelerate our commitment. So really, where we started from, I would say, was employee-led. You can see on the left-hand side, we're talking about ERGs in the US, employee networks, and actually being US-driven as a starting point. And actually, whilst we had internal goals in terms of representation, both from a race and ethnicity perspective in the US and gender, really, we were in this phase, and we talk about a little bit about transparency and putting data in the hands of people. We'd kind of give people a goal, but we probably wouldn't share very much about where they were. So it was kind of like then they weren't going to make much progress in that way. So actually, as you wind the clock forward to 2017, we announced our gender equality goals, which is 50-50. Gender balance across the whole of Accenture when we aggregate Accenture together by 2025. And really that has been the catalyst to accelerate our progress. Suddenly, by going out externally, asking the market, I guess, to hold us accountable to that, our business leaders are now listening, and they're asking, what's my data? What's my data? And you've got this kind of tension between probably legal data privacy in the business going, I want to know the data. And it's like, well, we can't really tell you the data. But actually, that really changed where we were. And I guess the other thing that I'm highlighting on this slide here in 2020, of course, all our organizations, I think, stepped up their work from a representation perspective and anti-racism perspective. We were discussing, and we've got this public commitments from our gender goals. We need to do the same from a race and ethnicity perspective. So we established goals last year. We had goals before. I'm talking about going public with these goals for the US, the UK, and South Africa. Those are the three locations where we have significant enough data to be able to set those goals. And I'll talk a little bit about how we did that later on. And what I'm really excited about actually is what 2021 and 2022 is going to look like on this journey. What else might we be talking about? What other areas of diversity? But I am quite super excited that we will be adding our measurement of inclusion to this. So when we come back to have this conversation in a couple of years' time, we can we can talk about that. But if we just move on to the next slide, I promised you a little bit of data, but I'm afraid it's the metrics that we're putting in the hands of the business. So talking about those personas, it's really important our business leaders see what's happening and see where the trends are across 3 key metrics for us. There are some other metrics also with some of our key HR processes, but here we're talking about headcount mix. Ultimately, I'm giving the examples of gender, but we do this for race and ethnicity too. What's the goal? What's my variance to the goal? How does that compare to the previous year end? Am I tracking upwards, downwards, staying the same? What trajectory am I on from the previous month? And what does this look like, accounting for, I guess, seasonality? We're a big, what I would call graduate recruiter, entry-level recruiter from college and university. So just looking at a month-on-month view may not give you the full picture. So looking and breaking that down, just as you said, Phil, into the supervisory organisation, into location, into career level. Where are the hotspots? Where do we need to be intervening as a global inclusion and diversity team? Where are HR business partners? Where is the business already picking up and understanding where their challenges are? And then putting data in the hands of people at key moments. So if I think about our promotion process each year, where are we looking at the gaps between, from a gender or ethnicity perspective? So that's actually, as you go through it, kind of in the same way that you talked about those different phases of the recruitment process. If I think about, we've got a long list, we've got a short list, we've got the decision points. What does that look like? Where are people dropping out and why? I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I think the work that you're doing there, and just it's interesting that you bring up a good point, which is while we are all working towards the focus on valuing and understanding diversity in our organization, we realize we have to take slightly different journeys because Accenture is fundamentally different than Workday as far as the makeup, the timing, the segments we serve, and so forth like that. So even though we are aligned on doing this and we have to get people on the same page, we have to approach it a different way. And that's what I think is both exciting part, but it can also be daunting for many organizations. Like, how do I do this? It's like, well, it's not easy, but you have to understand your organization and you have to be committed to the goals. And for us, as we start to get people on the same page, and when really public, I would say, for the first time, like Zoe, you were saying, on our commitments, we had to start somewhere. So how do you decide to do that? And that's where we're at, faced ourselves a bit of last year when we were focusing on it. And we had decided to make 4 broad commitments: hiring and developing diverse talent, strengthening our communities, cultivating a culture of belonging, which is, Zoe, what you're saying, that measurement of inclusion, and then building inclusive products and technology. And this is also pretty cool because we've committed to a roadmap, a belonging and diversity technology roadmap for the first time ever. And I think that's because that's our organization, that's something that people have really rallied around. But from an HR perspective, one of the things is like, okay, so how do we set these goals? And, I'm going to give you kind of maybe a practical way of the process that we went through here. One way is I think where many people start, and you would say, wow, this is a people analytics conference and technology and so forth. Yes, it is. But many people start, as we started, with some basic, what I would say, back of the napkin modeling. If we want to really make a significant change around one of the 4 goals we have, again, increasing diverse representation is one of the many goals. It's important and critical, but not sufficient to ensuring equity in organizations. How do we understand and look forward based on this model? So you can look at basic headcount trajectory, you can look at growth rate assumptions, attrition rate assumptions, and you can ballpark this. And one of the great dialogues we had with our executive team is like, okay, this is what the data says, right? But we want to do a lot more, right? This is what the data says we can do, but we want to do a lot more. And I love this tension between data and vision on really making progress here, because you can model out data and it's as good as what the model shows, but then if you have an organization that's committed, it can do a lot more. And so, from this kind of back and forth, we did commit to, like Zoe, that Accenture is committed to making their goals public, and we've made these public here around representation, about creating a culture of belonging, strengthening our communities, and building inclusive technologies. And that was fantastic, but it was just the first step, because the question then came up, how do we cascade these goals? I don't know if it's cascade. How do we ensure that every organization in every location around the world is aligned and committed to these goals? And that's where the back of the napkin modeling really is not sufficient. And for us, we pivoted between doing the back of the napkin modeling and putting a real workforce planning plan around our goals in adaptive. And this is what we've used to kind of move forward the organization about putting it into adaptive. And that has allowed us to really scale instead of redoing Excel sheet every week or every month and so forth like that. You just let it roll, and then you take those insights from there and you put it directly into an area where executives can know where they stand and then start to take action on that. So that was kind of our journey. I know journey's a little bit different, but I would love to hear, how did you go about that same process?
Yeah, I think the kind of back of a napkin starting point is a good analogy. When we made that commitment, like you said, it wasn't just a commitment that was like a nice idea. We definitely did some modeling to say this is going to be hard, but what does it look like? What do we need to commit to? What commitments? If we really believe that gender equality, parity is important for us, what that's going to look like. And on the next slide that you have here, it's kind of an example of, just as you said, if we take the examples of, hiring, if we think about turnover and the gaps in turnover, perhaps between men and women, and this is a gender model here, promotion, all of these different elements. If we'd carried along where we were, we were heading nowhere near, we were flatlining in that way. And so really what we needed to do was to make some commitments and be very clear. So if we want to do this, we're going to have to increase the recruitment mix to do that. We're going to have to focus on the retention. This isn't just going to happen. This isn't the I&D team or HR that's going to do this. This is the business that's going to have to make those commitments. Now, we've set that 50-50 goal globally, and of course, not all countries are the same. They have a different market. They have perhaps different type of work. Perhaps different, graduation from college, differences from a gender perspective. And so on the next slide, I'm just trying to illustrate that when I'm saying 50-50, that's not every business, every team, every country getting to 50-50. Some countries will be more equal than others, but everybody was given a goal that was relevant. There was still a stretch for them in order to grow, so that when we're there in 2025, everyone will have played their part. It's not enough just to say, well, our market, let's say, for example, in Japan, will not support that. Japan still needs to grow, albeit at a different rate. But I tell you, it's going to be interesting when we get to 2025, because there are some locations that are thinking, and it's without that modeling, well, we're going to get to 2025 too. And then when you do provide tools, and we've done the same, we can show that a little bit later on, the reality, what it would actually take for you to get to 50-50 by 2025. And I think that's really important. Just, it's not easy, and there's some quite probably difficult business decisions to take if that's your individual strategy. So we're providing a stretch yet, I guess, realistic approach. And as I said earlier, if we move to the next slide, 2020 was where we really made our recommitment and our public commitment from a race and ethnicity perspective. And these are the goals that we've shared here for the US, the UK, and South Africa. Now, this was really interesting because we could, for the US, have just taken the US market data and come up, with a number, whereas actually we were thinking about some different combinations. What if we looked at the graduate population and we assumed that only 80% of our hires needed a college degree rather than 100%? What could that adjust for us? Could that stretch us further? What if instead of looking at the whole of the US, or actually the whole of the UK, we were to look at the cities where we were actually hiring, where we actually had people, where we could make the difference? And I think it's something like, if we'd have taken like the general view, we probably would have only set a goal probably to around 10%, for example, for African American and Black representation. But actually that's been able to push us to 12. And for sure, our recruitment mix, again, is that we're our goal, our hiring goal is certainly higher than that in order to grow that. If we think about the UK population, and I don't know if there's any UK people here, the concentration of our African Caribbean Black population is more in the big cities. It's in London, in Birmingham, in Manchester, etc. So there's no point taking the UK census, actually look at the communities that you're hiring from. So I think that detail has been super important. And I'm really proud that we've made these commitments. Yesterday, our CEO, Julie, sent a note to our US population talking about the progress we've made on those. And the transparency is great. And I shared this with you earlier, Phil. She posts that on LinkedIn. She's posting exactly what she said to our employees. She wants when I say our stakeholders, everyone, the community outside of Accenture to see what we're doing and hold us accountable, challenge us.
Yeah, I think that was, when you shared with me what Julia said, I was like, wow, that is, that's, not only are setting your public goals and making them transparent, you are also holding yourself accountable by saying, here's the progress we've actually made in the numbers. And that's a step change in organizations. And honestly, I think it almost is, we've been setting goals around diversity for ages, right? But now we're getting, we're making this for more. I mean, it's like business objective. If we don't make it clear and transparent and out there and hold ourselves accountable, it's harder for us to make progress. And I love how you tied the goals you're setting to the actions you're actually taking and rethinking the way you're thinking about your talent pools in order to meet these goals. So thanks for that. And then the last one is around holding ourselves accountable. That's kind of what we've been talking about. Like if I think about the whole thing, we're like setting goals. We are all about holding ourselves accountable. And one of the ways we do this at Workday is we align Workday across kind of our major ways. Like we have company-wide OKRs. Those company-wide OKRs are intentionally put and aligned with specific goals in workforce analytics, which is a kind of insights dashboard that all of our VPs have. And then they have kind of ongoing quarterly views, like your quarterly view that you showed, like how year to date we've done. And what's really important, and this is just kind of a view of our workforce analytics, is like along with all the other people goals that we have, we ensure that each leader knows where they stand and where they need to move from. And this is available for them, and they're able to track this. And not only that, we focus on saying, hey, we take that data from the workforce planning diversity model, and we actually put it in a specific report, which they have access to, which says, hey, here's your current headcount, here's your FY22 goal, here's your hires this quarter, promotions, transfers, total attrition. And so this is as transparent as it can get so they can know whether or not they're actually making action. And again, this is just going beyond saying, here's your year-end target, but this is more like, here's how you're doing across all of these domains, which helps anchor it in there. And the last thing I want to talk to about holding ourselves accountable that we've done here, and this is a call out, a commitment we've made, is about cultivating a culture of belonging, which is for us ensuring that we provide equity and parity in our processes. So we've been talking a lot about planning for diverse representation, which is essential, and gender parity when it comes to representation. But how do organizations actually hold themselves accountable to the outcomes of the major HR processes, like hiring, promotions, belonging, retention, leadership, so forth like that. And at Workday, and it actually started on our team, this kind of measure of what we call the Vibe Index, which is the kind of a parity across all of our diverse representation. And what that does is looks at the kind of major 5 outcomes that looks at parity. It looks at the intersectionality. So not just, gender and U.S. race and ethnicity, it's the combination of those. How are our Asian females looking as the important outcomes of this? And again, this is getting beyond diverse representation to measuring actual parity here. And we had prototyped this Vibe Index, and I'm happy to say that as a product, we will be having Vibe Index available in our people analytics tool, so people can actually have kind of a realistic view of the equity inside the organization. And even cooler, and I believe in the future, this is the future looking statement, by the way, you'll be able to benchmark compared to all the other Workday customers how you're doing as far as the equity in your organization. And I know, Zoe, me and you have talked a little bit about that, but I think this is one of the ways that goes beyond holding ourselves accountable for diverse representation, but also hold ourselves accountable for the internal equity inside the organization. So,
yeah,
I
think that's super important. I mean, I know at my hands, I've got access to gender data over here and ethnicity data here. And whilst, I'm pretty handy and I can kind of pull it together, having that visual representation and having that visual representation across the processes, that's what we're really trying to do. We've hired people into the organization. Now let's make sure that they can grow, progress, thrive, here. So yeah, that's going to be super interesting. I know that it was interesting in terms of holding ourselves accountable. On the next slide, I've talked just briefly also, we've got an I&D modeling tool, and I guess where I'm coming from here, it's not necessarily about the goal setting. We're in conversations, we set an objective at the start of the year, we break those down. We have, let's say, discussions with our different countries where they say, no, we can't. And we say, yes, we can, and we'll help you. And there's a merry dance there. But then what this tool does is really putting in the hands of like, okay, where do I need to course correct in the year? You've set me this goal. I have this ambition to get here this year, here by 2025. Let me model a scenario where I increase the recruitment mix, or I change the growth assumptions in terms of headcount, or I change our turnover, the number of people leaving the organization, and show me where that gets to. And I think putting that in the hands of the business and on our HR folks who are supporting them really gives them some insights, some kind of good reality check. On the next slide, I think I've touched on this a little bit as well. In terms of holding ourselves accountable, I'll restate that transparency creates trust for us. You can go take a look at our US metrics. We publish those annually. This year was the first time that you'll see that where we, that intersection, if you like, of gender, race and ethnicity that we've put there. So this is the US data. Not a forward-looking statement, but I would like to see us do that more in other locations around the world. And Accenture, we certainly are in some, but the US really has been the leader for us in that space. And then I think just the last slide that I had here was, I think you agreed, Phil, when I shared this with you, it's kind of a summary of just what I think, if you were starting to think about what works as a starting point. So, and I'm kind of pleased that when we're talking about people analytics in data, there's quite a lot of data in here. This is not soft stuff. This is not kind of taking care of people, which is also important, and it's all there, but it's actually to drive change. It's about goals. It's about transparency. It's looking at problems and opportunities, trends, seeing what needs to be fixed. Of course, there are strategy, innovation around how we reach people, how we're sourcing new pools of talent. There's a lot of talk, for example, about apprenticeships. So being able to join a company like Accenture, which traditionally has been a classic, recruiting from university, recruiting from college. Is that what we, is that the only group of people? Are we just, perpetuating a non-diverse organization in that way? So thinking differently about our people, looking at equity in pay and promotions. We've talked about that from a process perspective. Some of the more softer stuff about providing role models. You can't be what you can't see. Leveling the playing field, making sure your culture, the benefits are suiting the people that are working for you, and as those needs shift, and I think if ever there was a year where needs shifted, it was this past one. And then, of course, creating that sense of belonging and inclusive culture to unlock the potential to enable everyone, as I said, to thrive. And then I think this last important piece is, I'm talking about internally in Accenture, but I couldn't do what I do unless I'm collaborating with people like you, Phil, to learn from Workday, or the people on this call today, or even collaborating and talking, with governments, with lawmakers. What are we doing? What are we advocating, and looking outside to support this journey that we're all on?
I thought it was fascinating that this is the slide you ended with. I was like, dang, that's really, like, that's the slide, but like, this is the way. And I love how data is infused in these actions. I think this is what's really transformed maybe the I&D function, is that the partnership, and Karen Taylor and I, our Chief Diversity Officer, had a long conversation. The partnership between our two functions are critical to making real progress. And I think that's where people analytics for good really comes into play, and that we should, continue to lead and push organizations to make real progress in these areas. So Zoe, thanks so much for doing this conversation. I know Al will mystically come back in to here to do a little Q&A.
I gotta say, thank you for taking such a thoughtful, substantive approach to this very important topic. It has been the case over the years, and Zoe, you highlighted it, that many organizations have been at this for a long time. And I recall supporting the Diversity Council at Gap Inc. in the early 2000s. And I remember there were a couple leaders that came through at the time, and they were really progressive, really thoughtful, yet they were under-resourced. It was an influence position. Fast forward 20 years, it is a critical, non-negotiable way of formulating talent strategies and creating culture and all these, very important aspects of doing business. So I do have 28,000 questions, but I'm gonna pick a couple, because when we talk about diversity in particular, and I want to get to inclusion and feeling belonging in a minute, but diversity, and many go straight to hiring, but retention is a key aspect of diversity as well, of course. There's an argument or pushback or frustration by some, and I am taking a point of view, this is not my view, I'm just qualifying that, that when we talk, whether it be about gender or people of a minority group, that there's just not the pool of talent to attract and create parity within an organization. And in other words, it's hard. And so, Zoe, what is your comment to that? Because I think many use that as an excuse either not to hit their targets or just not really take a earnest approach to make this happen. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's really interesting that sometimes you'll hear the message that we're on fire. Our demand from a recruitment perspective, we're on fire. We can't find the diverse talent because we're running at pace. And then you go to the other phase where we're not on fire, and it's like we can't find the talent we need because they haven't got the specific skills that this very narrow kind of view of the world that we need. So it's like we're never in the solution, in the time where we have the talent. So you have to get creative. That kind of one of the boxes on there about that innovative piece. This is a long-term game. You're not just going to fix. We didn't set a goal to hit next year and not do this. We're in the business of transforming Accenture. So if you're finding that you haven't got the right sourcing strategies, is your sourcing strategy right? What have you created in the hiring process that's going to mean folk are not getting through that process? And Phil, you had that example of the different steps in the recruitment process. Where are groups not being able to progress through that process and taking a look? It's about investing with organizations like Girls Who Code, for example, in the US, or we have lots of girls in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths over in Europe, working with partners like that, investing in female talent. If this is part of your business strategy, you've got to kind of put the money there and invest in it for the long term. So I would say it's that.
Yeah, sticking with you, Zoe, just for a minute, and Phil, I'll bring you in this in a second. I have had several discussions over the past year around the broader philosophy around the role of organizations being a catalyst for social change. And, are organizations created to drive social change? Question mark. Is it to make money, as service customer? It can get to be a very philosophical, existential question. That being said, there's no doubt that the habits and ways of being that we conduct ourselves at work carry over to our personal lives and vice versa. So in my view, there needs to be some accountability. There needs to be a safe place to nurture ways to be inclusive and empathetic and respectful and all those wonderful things. So Zoe, what are your thoughts there in the role of Accenture specifically, or organizations in general, to be a place to help build habits and in turn, drive social well-being?
I absolutely think it's an organization's purpose. And I know purpose is a word of the moment, but I would absolutely say it is. Now, my role personally is about transforming Accenture, but I'm looking for a ripple effect here. Like, sure, we can show it. I mean, we're a consulting and technology organization, right? So we're working with our clients. I want to make sure at a first stage that we're showing up with a diverse team. We know what a diverse and inclusive team brings to an organization. It's going to be more innovative. The benefits are out there. We can go read all the studies on that. But it's more than that. What does actually showing up with a diverse team create? When we're thinking about making sure our products are accessible, when we're talking about responsible AI, when we're talking about inclusive design, that's not just impacting the 500,000 Accenture folk, that's impacting the billions of customers and future potential customers, I guess, that our clients are serving. So while I'm focused on the people within Accenture, my purpose is to go beyond that. And I for sure think it's a broader responsibility.
Thank you for that, Zoe. Phil, your thoughts there?
Yeah, I agree. It is, I think sometimes in this work, you feel daunted that you can't make a change. Just being honest and transparent, like there's so much progress that needs to be, what can you do? And I think, at least for me, being being committed to what we can do internally, and then seeing how our organization aligns to, for us, you have to take what your organization does, right? For Accenture, it's, servicing all these customers. For us, it's building the best technology, world-class technology that our customers use. And the fact that we're committing to and having committed to things like the Vibe Index as a technology solution for organizations and a belonging diversity roadmap on our technology is saying that it's not sufficient for us to value this as an important thing. It is beneficial for all our customers to do this. And I think that goes beyond setting those goals, make them transparent. It goes beyond. It's that, when you talk about Al, I think you're talking about a little bit of stakeholder capitalism there, the good for all, because we know if it's good for us, it's going to be really great for our customers.
Yeah, I have firms of endearment behind me here. Yeah, I mean, it's, staying with you, Phil, for a second, because you used the term workforce planning a couple times. And when I hear workforce planning, I get really excited because it's something I do, but it's also something that I think is misunderstood by many in the world, because they take a recruiting first approach, really headcount planning.
Mm-hmm.
Yet when we look at workforce planning, it's really a systematic approach. How are we bringing in talent, retaining talent, moving talent around, celebrating them, all these things. So, Phil, what's workforce planning to you specifically to help solve this DEI challenge?
I don't know, like for you, Zoe, like traditional headcount planning and recruitment, those are really critical. You still need a budget. You still need to run your business, right? So that's there. But this idea of workforce planning means that when you're making business decisions about the transformation of your organization, understanding the implications of the impact on your diverse talent, right? So I think the location strategy is probably the best one. When you're thinking about transforming your organization and where you're going to hire from, are you shifting locations that not only gets the skills you need, but also is a diverse representation of where you need to go? And so the expanded view of workforce planning is exactly what's needed to infuse these different variables, which are so important for making progress, into understanding that. And the good thing is you can do this in Excel. Lots of people can do this. That's really easy. The hard thing is, can you cascade this, like Zoe, I know you guys have, and we have, across the entire organization? That's where you need some more sophisticated use of technology.
I'm excited for a lot of reasons. Number one, what you shared. Number two, you all are going to be over at the Workday booth after this. So I just if you want to talk with Phil or Zoe directly, head over there after the session. We got time for maybe one or two more questions. And my question is going back to Zoe, I believe you mentioned it, and Phil, you touched on it as well, is this notion of language. And I cite, and Phil, you probably heard me say this Chinese proverb: the beginning of wisdom is calling things by their right names. Mm. And I believe in a variety of topics in HR, diversity, equity, and inclusion specifically, we haven't spent defining the terms, the language that we're using. And you started by getting on the same page. So Zoe, can we start with you? What is your view and what work have you done to actually ensure that you're talking the same language and not talking past one another there at Accenture?
It's interesting when I think from a global organization perspective, because ultimately we are not talking the same language in many ways. And I think there can be a danger that if you take, you saw on the trajectory, we started this work in the US. If you take the US language around what we're talking here, that is not going to necessarily resonate in other locations. So actually, it's more of a, rather than aligning on the same language, it's probably kind of understanding what's the language and what means something in the location that you are. So, when we're talking about race and ethnicity, for example, that is so specific to the location, the history, the context. let me be clear, we are not in the business of setting goals where we're adding perhaps visually similar individuals together. We're talking about that in a distinct, as a distinct topic, and making that very clear, and helping some of our US colleagues understand kind of the rest of the world has been kind of super important. And then I guess in the concept of inclusion and belonging, that's a really important kind of language as well, because you have to understand that while some, I guess, cultures are seeking, deriving belonging from an organization, that's not so natural. There may be, some cultures that are better at boundaries, perhaps, than others about that, and how do you talk about things from a global context, but then localize from a relevant level. And then one final thing, there's so many words that you can use to describe functions. We call it inclusion and diversity. There's D, E, and I. There's the I and B. All of these kind of things. Ultimately, whatever you call it, we're all seeking that equal outcomes for everyone to thrive in our organizations. And so, yeah, I guess we're comfortable with it being uncomfortable.
Yeah, good. At least you're calling it out and conscious of it. I think that is, a critical first step. Phil, as we start to close, what are your comments there?
Yeah,
language?
I mean, Zoe summed it up really well. We're all moving towards this, more equitable and more parity in our organizations, increasing diversity, and we have to localize, and you just can't get over it. And there's not a one solution to solve it. You have to say we're committed to this, and then find out how to localize. So I wish there was some kind of magic words here, Al, but it's really about that kind of localization. Yeah.
Well, I think Zoe summed it up really well in that last comment, in that it is uncomfortable. There is ambiguity, and the idea, this is not a linear problem, and it's not a problem that's going to be solved in a day. It's transformative. It's going to take time, and many people are uncomfortable with that. And, it's something that has to be accepted. Hey, as we start to wrap up, I just, again, want to thank you. I see a lot of presentations, somewhat obviously, and I celebrate each and every one of them. I do want to say that the level of practicality and actionability of what you shared is uncommon, and I really celebrate both of you for putting this forth today. So Thank you.